A good afternoon, Fighting Irish fans, and welcome to another edition of Football Fridays at the Eck presented by Guinness. I'm Chris Palmquist from the Notre Dame Alumni Association. We have another outstanding show lined up for you today to get you ready for tomorrow's game between the number 4 Fighting Irish and the Louisville Cardinals. We'll have student performances from both the Glee Club and the Palm Squad. We'll get a sneak peek at this week's What Would You Fight For segment. Tim Prister from Irish Illustrated and Lou Samoji of Blue and Gold Illustrated will answer your questions about the matchup with the Cardinals. And Mike Brey, the Glenn and Stacey Murphy head men's basketball coach, will join us live to talk about the upcoming season. All that and more coming up over the next hour. But as always, we're going to start the show with a nice segment here on a cooking demo. We're going to be joined by Vagas Ferguson, one of the best running backs in Notre Dame history. In just a few minutes, we're working on some technical issues with him. But instead, as we'll start things off here, as has been said countless times, this football season is unlike any other that we've been through. And for most of us, not being able to go to campus and sit in the stands to cheer on the Irish has been difficult. One of the things I personally miss most is waking up early on a brisk Saturday morning, driving over to the Jack or bookstore or library lot and getting my tailgate tent set up in its perfect location. Then it's all about the food, let's be honest. Whether it's hot dogs and burgers, chili, or a fried chicken dinner from Martin's, don't worry, we won't tell. Tailgate food is the best sidekick for Notre Dame football. Erin Clark, member of the Notre Dame class of 2008, runs the Well Plated blog and is the author of the recently released Well Plated cookbook. Her mission is to make healthy eating affordable, accessible, and delicious, but also puts a new twist on some tailgate foods, including these cheesy taco stuffed mini peppers.
Hey everyone, today you are going to learn to make a game day appetizer that is easy and crazy irresistible. These are cheesy taco stuffed mini peppers. My name is Erin Clark. I am a grad of the class of 2008 and I am the author of the Well Plated cookbook. That is where you can find this recipe, and I have hundreds more recipes delicious just like this at my website, wellplated.com. Let's get started. All right, so to start out, I have a pound of mini peppers. Aren't these just so cute? In addition to snacking on these little guys, they are also great for splitting and stuffing. So what you want to do is take one of your peppers and then cut it right down through the stem. You don't even need to pull the stem off. And if you look, you can see how one side is really skinny and one side is really wide. You want to cut it through the skinny side so that you have this nice, delicious vessel for stuffing with our delicious turkey taco filling. So once you have your peppers split, you're going to take a small spoon and then scrape the membrane out. All right, our mini peppers are all arranged on the sheet pan, and as you can see here, I've lined it with parchment paper. I hate washing dishes, and this is just gonna make my job a little bit easier. And I'm going to pop them into an oven, bake them for about 15 to 20 minutes. This will let them soften up a little bit, and then in the meantime, we're gonna get to work on our turkey taco filling. Over here on the stove, I have some ground turkey that I am sauteing with a heap of chili powder and cumin to give it classic taco flavor, along with some garlic powder, black pepper, and a big pinch of salt. Using ground turkey in place of ground beef is one of my favorite stealthy, healthy swaps, as I like to call it. Turkey's a lot leaner, but thanks to this wallop of spices, it's still gonna have great flavor, no bland filling for us. Next up, a can of diced tomatoes and green chilies. This stuff tastes like Tex-Mex in a can. All right, I'm gonna take some of that luscious cheese and stir it into the filling. All right, peppers are ready to come out. As you can see, they've softened up just a little bit. They look absolutely perfect. All right, now we're going to put the stuff into taco stuffed peppers. I'm gonna take our dreamy turkey filling and pile it right on in. This filling smells super zesty. I love the ooey gooey cheese that we have going on, and really overall, whenever these are around, it just feels like a party. And now, since on game day there is no thing as too much cheese, I'm gonna add some more on top. And now to make them ooey gooey good, they go back into the oven to melt the cheese. Just look at these cheesy beauties. I'm gonna finish them off with a sprinkle of fresh cilantro, add some nice color, and a little bit of pop. Perfect. And now all that is left is to dig in. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Erin Clark. You can find this recipe in my cookbook, the Well Plated Cookbook, or hundreds more easy, healthy, family-friendly recipes at my website, wellplated.com. Go Irish!
Well, as Erin said, that's wellplated.com for tons of great recipes from and for the Notre Dame family. Now, you may not recognize the name Joseph Casasanta, but you're definitely familiar with his work. Casasanta graduated from Notre Dame in 1923 and eventually became the director of the music department, also led the university band, the orchestra, and the glee club. He arranged the Notre Dame Victory March into the version we hear today and composed the alma mater, Notre Dame Our Mother, Hike Notre Dame, When Irish Backs Go Marching By, and Down the Line. The glee club, of which Casasanta was both a member and the director, continues to bring these songs to life today.
Up Notre Dame and answer the cry, gathering foemen fling to the sky. Fight, 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 brave foes advancing, challenge your name, march to the battle, Notre Dame. Fight, 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 and when the Irish backs go marching by, the cheering thousands shout their battle cry. For Notre Dame men are marching into the game, fighting the fight for you, Notre Dame. Smashing, smashing through the sweep the foeman's ranks away. Notre Dame men fight for gold and blue, then Notre Dame men will win that day. On down the line, beside the glory of her name. On down the line, beneath the colors of an ancient faith. The cheering thousands shout their battle cry. For Notre Dame men are marching into the game, fighting the fight for you, Notre Dame. And when that Irish line goes smashing, smashing through the sweep the foeman's ranks away. When Notre Dame men fight for gold and blue, then Notre Dame men will win that day.
Well, thank you so much to the Glee Club. Be sure you check them out and give them a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Of course, unable to see them in concert much this year, but when they are able to tour again, if they come to your area, be sure to go out and support the guys. Well, last week's game against Florida State was one of those picture-perfect South Bend fall days that recruiting coordinator Brian Polian, in a normal year, would absolutely love to showcase to recruits. The sun was shining most of the day, and even at kickoff, it was a beautiful 64 degrees under the lights. Now, with a December 5th home game on the schedule, though, you can bet the temperature when Syracuse comes to South Bend will be just a little bit cooler. So we asked our Notre Dame students which they prefer, those sometimes sweltering South Bend days in the early season, or those games when you could go through an entire box of hot hands.
I like cold weather games. If it's sunny and cold, that's my favorite type of weather. The real fall aesthetic.
The fall, like the in-between weather. That's what I grew up going to, those games.
Ooh, definitely hot weather because it will get cold later on, but cold weather, it's going to stay cold the whole day. I have to say I'm a cold weather game person. I hate to sweat during a game. I like to bundle up in the colds with all my friends. So definitely cold weather game.
Cold weather. Hot weather, definitely.
I really love the hot weather. I just think it's so fun to have a game in the middle of the day when it's really nice out, especially right now.
Definitely warm weather. I'm from Hawaii and it's always warm there.
Definitely hot weather games. Not a big fan of the cold, and I think it's just a more energetic experience when I'm not completely freezing the whole game. So
I'm definitely a hot weather game. I'm from Texas.
Definitely hot weather. During the tailgate season, it's a lot better during the hot weather, so hot weather games is the win.
I'm a hot weather game guy myself, but that being said, November 7th, when Clemson's in town, give me that 30 degrees, 40-mile-an-hour winds, and maybe some snow too. Go ahead, South Bend, bring it on. Well, a dominant rushing performance led the Irish to a win last Saturday to improve to 3-0 on the season. Next up now for the fourth-ranked Irish is a Louisville squad that is coming off a third straight loss, but has some dangerous players on offense to keep an eye on. Joining us to talk about the Cardinals, the stellar Irish offensive line play, and what to expect tomorrow at 2:30 is Tim Prister, senior editor of Irish Illustrated and 1982 Notre Dame grad. Tim, thanks so much for joining us here for Football Fridays at the Eck presented by Guinness.
My pleasure, Chris. Thank you.
Now, Tim, when we talked last week with the gap between games, I think a lot of people expected the offense to come out a little shaky last Saturday against Florida State, but Ian Book looked solid. The ground game was absolutely dominant. What stood out to you on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, I really liked Ian Book's decisiveness. He trusted his eyes. He went for it. When a guy broke open, he got rid of the ball quickly. I think a big reason why Javon McKinley had a big day was because Ian Book got rid of the ball quickly, got it in his hands, allowed him to make plays on some good defensive backs. So I thought that was really, really encouraging. As much as Florida State has struggled, they had not been gashed like that in the running game. But Notre Dame's offensive line has the potential to be a really great offensive line. 353 yards rushing. They just chewed up and spit out that Florida State defensive front. So, between what the offensive line did for the running backs were great. It's a lot easier to be great when the line's blocking like that. And for me, really, the most encouraging thing is to see Ian Book be so decisive, and hopefully he continues to do that moving forward.
Now, of course, if anyone watching has a question for Tim, go ahead and ask those in the chat. We'll get to those a little bit later. Tim, you mentioned something about the offensive line, and you think back of the Notre Dame offensive lines of recent vintage have been really solid. We won the Joe Moore Award a few years back when McGlinchey and Nelson were anchoring that left side. There doesn't seem to be a McGlinchey or a Nelson in particular on this offensive line, but you could argue that the sum of its parts is as good, if not better, than that 2017 offensive line. How would you kind of compare these five guys?
I would agree with that, Chris. The sum of the parts is a really outstanding offensive line. I think Liam Eichenberg still has a good, or will have a very good chance of being a first-round draft choice. There won't be a second one there like there was with McGlinchey and Nelson. But I think he's the standout. Jarrett Patterson has really, really emerged at center. His work against South Florida, I know South Florida wasn't very good, but he was absolutely dominant that whole game. And then I would say Hainsey and Banks come next, and Tommy Kramer probably has been the least consistent of that group, but still, that's a fifth-year senior, a big body, a big offensive guard. So collectively, they have played together so much. They have 129 combined starts, I believe it is now. And that's, Josh Lugg hasn't even really had much of an opportunity to get in there, and he's capable. We saw that last year. So that's a great group. And collectively, I think it certainly can be as good as the 2017 offensive line. I think they're on the short list for the Joe Moore Award again at this point.
Now, as good as the offense was Saturday night, defense came out a little shaky, and I think that might have been a little surprising to a lot of people, especially with what we've seen out of Clark Lee's defenses over the last few years. 26 points allowed to the Florida State offense. Did have a short field a couple of times off a couple of Notre Dame turnovers early. But what were your takeaways from the defense, and is there any reason to be concerned going forward?
Well, I think we kind of had it reversed, didn't we, Chris? We said the offense and Ian Book might struggle out of the gate, and it was the defense. And as it turned out, there were some reasons for that. Number one, COVID hit the defense harder than the offense during that period. And the recovery, there was a lot of missed practice time. A lot of guys that played last week didn't get back into practice mode until after last week started. Brian Kelly said that they felt like there were some times where they were still trying to get lined up when the ball was getting snapped, or the term he used, they didn't have their cleats in the ground yet. So, I mean, I think there were some things conspiring against them a little bit, in addition to the fact that, let's give credit where it's due. Jordan Travis did a really nice job in his first start for Florida State at quarterback. Damian Webb is a hard running back to bring down, kind of like Kyron Williams. And then Tamori and Terry had a really good game too. So they had some things working against them a little bit. Are there things to be concerned about? Yeah, I think to some extent, because I think the guy that they really miss the most is Khalid Kareem. He was so steady and, a real foundation for your run defense at the strong side defensive end. Not necessarily your best pass rusher, but you could count on him for that. He would go off, he would leave the field because he'd be banged up, but he always came back in and played. So I think I don't know that their personnel there, their pass rush is as good as it's been. Isaiah Foskey, I think, was limited last week, so we didn't see a lot of him. And then Jack Kaiser, who did a great job at Buck linebacker in a South Florida game, wasn't available. There was some mixing and matching that had to be done in the secondary as well. So I think some things conspired against them. There's a bit of a concern there. I expect them to play better this week, but Louisville has more offensive weapons than Florida State did.
That's a perfect segue. It's like you're reading my script here, Tim. We saw Louisville head coach Scott Satterfield in his first game with the Cardinals last year on Labor Day weekend. Program, I think it's safe to say, is heading in the right direction, but they have lost 3 straight. What have you seen when you watch the Cardinals? Because they absolutely have talent, especially at those offensive skill positions.
Yeah, they're still explosive offensively. Now, Scott Satterfield has talked about they haven't been able to hit the big play like they did last year. Malik Cunningham, the quarterback, averaged an incredible 18 yards per completion last year. So they were a huge big play offense last year. They haven't hit those as much so far this year. And then turnovers have just destroyed them. 2 in the first game that they won against Western Kentucky, and then 3 each against Miami, Pittsburgh, and Georgia Tech. But they still have a ton of weapons. Cunningham at quarterback can hurt you with his feet and hurt you with his arm. Javian Hawkins is an outstanding running back. Not real big, and we say that about Kyron Williams, but breaks tackles like Kyron Williams does and is even speedier. Tutu Atwell, their wide receiver, is the guy that can really take it, really beat you deep. He can get deep on any secondary. They just haven't connected a whole lot. They have other receivers, Des Patrick, Justin Marshall, Braden Smith is a true freshman that I like a lot. And they have a tight end, Marshawn Ford. So they have weapons. Their offensive approach is very diverse and tricky, pre-snap, post-snap. You have to have a lot of eye discipline defensively to deal with this. And Brian Kelly said, first and foremost, they want to simplify things defensively this week, get their cleats in the ground, and really try to dial into what Louisville is doing.
You mentioned Javian Hawkins. You're probably pretty good when your nickname is PlayStation. Now, I'm sure Coach Kelly and the team are fully focused on Louisville, as are you, I'm certain, heading into tomorrow. But as fans, our eyes have been looking ahead to November 7th all year for that Clemson game. Now, between now and then, there are the first 2 road trips of the season to Pitt and Georgia Tech. How do the Irish get to 6-0 and set up that massive game against Clemson?
Well, you may be in a situation where you're in a bit of a shootout and a scoring match this weekend, although I think Notre Dame's defense will play better than they did last week. So I see a high-scoring game, and Notre Dame should come out on top. A bit more concerned about going to Pittsburgh because that is one great defensive line. And it's what a tremendous matchup with the Pittsburgh pass rush against Notre Dame's offensive line, which has been really good since last year as a pass blocking unit. So it's a great matchup. But Pat Narduzzi, their head coach, has done a good job in the past of really stymieing Notre Dame's offense. So that could be a little bit more lower scoring and a little bit closer in score. And then Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech is the most experienced team returning on the Notre Dame schedule, and they've played pretty well. I mean, they beat Florida State, and they've played some. They beat Louisville, so they've played some good football. I think Notre Dame goes down and wins that game. But the one that concerns me the most is Pittsburgh, because they can limit you anytime the strength of a team is defense. They can limit your, obviously limit your scoring and put a little pressure on you to score a little bit more. But I'm still pretty confident, Chris, that when Clemson comes to town on November 7th, Notre Dame will indeed be 6-0.
They answered any questions you might have had about Clemson last week with that beat down in Miami. Now, we do have a couple of audience questions here, so let's go ahead and pull one of those up. So after a slow start against Duke, Tim, the offensive line and running game really shined the last 2 weeks. What have you seen as the key to that success?
I really think Tommy Rees as an offensive coordinator has done a really, really nice job. He seems to be one step ahead of the opposing defensive coordinators. They've altered their blocking schemes a little bit, or I should say they've emphasized certain blocking schemes more than they did under Chip Long. It's more of a zone blocking scheme, partly because it fits the offensive line, but probably more so it fits the running backs behind that line with Williams and Chris Tyree. Both speedy backs. You want to run that outside zone play with them, and it's been very successful. I think Tommy Rees has shown that, even if the running game's not working, he'll stick with it. He knows he has a great offensive line. He knows he has a quarterback that can get things done, is experienced, and he's now got a few running backs that he can count on. Next now is to get those wide receivers more involved, and Kevin Austin coming back should help them. My key for the game, though, is the tight ends this week. I think because of what Louisville does defensively with their 3-4 and their undersized linebackers, I think there's some play actions in there that Ian Book can dump over the middle to Michael Mayer or Tommy Tremble, and they can do some real damage.
Before I let you go, what is your prediction for tomorrow?
Pretty high scoring. Last week we said, it was interesting, all of us at Irish Illustrated said low scoring, and the game went over in the first half. So we're looking in the other direction a little bit here, because Louisville's defense is really, really very bad and very porous. So higher scoring, and I'm looking at Notre Dame 45, Louisville 21.
Tim, where can people read your work?
We are at irishillustrated.com. Everything you can imagine about Notre Dame football, Notre Dame sports in general. Recruiting, very heavy recruiting, irishillustrated.com. We have it all.
Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Anytime.
All right. Well, every week here at Football Fridays, we get the chance to share with you some of the amazing work being done by Notre Dame faculty, staff, and students. What Would You Fight For is the award-winning segment that airs during halftime of Irish home games on NBC and tells the story of the work and impact of Notre Dame on campus and around the world. This year alone, these segments have shown work being done to change the way doctors interact with patients, how to make communities more resilient to climate change, and a groundbreaking research for brachial plexus injuries. This week, we're pleased to give you an early look at this week's story, Fighting to Prevent Homelessness.
It's a humbling thing to have to pick up the phone and call for help.
Hello, you have reached the Chicago Homelessness Prevention Call Center.
I moved here to Chicago to take a job, but 2 weeks into the training, the pandemic struck and I was placed on leave.
I'm calling for rent, security deposit, gas, or shelter.
I couldn't afford the apartment that I had rented. I ended up sleeping in a friend's car and showering in their place. I was thankful for that, but I was really scared that I was going to end up in the streets.
At the University of Notre Dame, the Wilson Sheehan Lab for Economic Opportunities designs and implements research to help people move out of poverty. In partnership with Catholic Charities, the lab pioneered a study of people on the brink of homelessness.
Our study focused on Chicago, where the city has a homeless prevention call center that arranges one-time emergency financial assistance. We found that people that received funds were 76% less likely to become homeless.
Notre Dame's research has allowed us to be way more proactive in targeting and in funding solutions. And to date, hundreds of families in Chicago have been able to stay in their homes through the Homeless Prevention Call Center.
What we learned is that emergency financial assistance doesn't simply kick the can down the road. It helps people overcome a crisis and keeps them in the home long term.
On April 22nd, I heard back from the call center, and it was the best day of my life. I'm living in an apartment now, and I have a great job.
The University of Notre Dame asks, what would you fight for?
Fighting to prevent homelessness. We are the Fighting Irish.
As always, I'm excited to welcome back to the program Double Domer Beth Grizzoli, the Director of Multimedia Services at Notre Dame, whose team works on these What Would You Fight For spots. Beth, thanks so much for joining us again.
Glad to be here, Chris.
Oh, it's such a great story and obviously incredibly timely as millions of Americans have been impacted financially by the coronavirus pandemic. I think one of the things that jumped out to me in the piece was Professor Evans saying that this emergency funding doesn't just delay homelessness, it usually prevents it. What stood out to you?
Oh, I agree. The nice thing about this is I think what Leo does is they work so hard to help not-for-profits analyze their work. And a lot of these groups have missions to do great work, but sometimes they don't know if it's working or not. And these economists are just the best. They're pros. They can come in and analyze the situation and say, what you're doing is working or what you're doing isn't working. And of course, this Catholic Charities Emergency Homeless Prevention Line had astounding results. Great success rate.
What can you tell us about Leo? We were talking a little bit before this interview about their mission and their work, but it seems like a really interesting program, one that could be a little scary for some nonprofits to partner with.
Exactly. I really admire the groups that partner with them, and they're always seeking new partners because, you know, people work very hard in their organizations, and I think it's a little scary to maybe have someone analyze it and say, you know, you're working really hard, but nothing's working. And I really admire the groups that have enough courage to stand up and say, no, we need to know if what we're doing is working and how we can do better. And so they just really, really are great partners with Leo.
Beth, we have a couple weeks off, but I hope you'll come back and talk with us again in November before the big Clemson game.
I will. We have another new story to share with everybody.
Beth, thanks so much again for joining us.
Glad to be here. Bye, Chris.
Well, after some technical issues, we're excited to welcome our catching up with this guest this week. He's one of the best running backs in Notre Dame football history. He's the first player in Irish history to rush for more than 1,000 yards in back-to-back seasons, a consensus All-American his senior year and 5th in the Heisman Trophy voting that same season. Graduated as Notre Dame's all-time leading rusher, still ranks 3rd on the career list, a first-round draft pick and member of the Notre Dame class of 1980. Joining us from his cell phone, Vagas Ferguson. Vagas, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, Chris, it was a tough one. We got it done, though. We made it. Thank you for having me, Chris. I appreciate you.
Now, let's start before you get to South Bend in your career. You went to high school and now still live in Richmond, Indiana, about 75 miles east of Indianapolis. What was the recruiting process like for you, and how did you end up at Notre Dame?
Well, it's funny because the Big Ten mainly. At the time, I didn't know much about Notre Dame because I live right in the Big Ten area. I have Ohio State to the east of me. I have Purdue, Indiana to the west of me. So I was really more familiar with those teams. Michigan, of course, all those, and not so much Notre Dame. So it was the reason we had alumni here in town that took my cousin to a Notre Dame game. He was a senior. He was a tight end for us. His name was Lamar Lundy. He was, and he was my cousin. So he took us up to a game. That's the first time I really knew Notre Dame was even in Indiana. So, I came familiar at that point, and then from there, really didn't think about going to school at Notre Dame initially. I was a sophomore at the time when we went up with my cousin, so I wasn't really thinking about it. I just thought it was get to go see a football game, and so I was really excited to get to the campus and see what was going. We got in the locker room. Aaron was coaching there. Precision was still coaching, and to see that the mystique and the fans and all the rowdiness. So it was exciting, but again, I come back home and that's probably the first college game I ever went to. be truthful. So other than that, I didn't know much about Notre Dame.
Well, we're glad you ended up here. I want to remind everybody that if you have a question for Vegas, you can submit them now. We'll answer a couple of them later in the interview. Now, you did mention that your first time up here, Era was the coach, but you played for Dan Devine. And I think sometimes he's really overlooked when people mention Rockne or Leahy or Era. What was it like to play for Coach Devine?
It was good. I think Coach Devine, he came out of at the time he came in 75 after Era retired. And he came from a pro, he was a pro coach at that time. He had a lot of in Green Bay, as a matter of fact. It was kind of tough for him up there because he didn't win. I don't think he won, and the fans were really on his case. They did a lot of things to him and his family, so a lot of negative things. So he was kind of drawn back. He wasn't as outgoing person probably as he was early in his coaching career. When we got him there, and when I got there at Notre Dame, he wasn't very talkative, wasn't very personable, but the coaches around him, he had good coaching staff around him, guys who, really loved Notre Dame football, Notre Dame loved football. And so those guys kind of carried it. He was instrumental in, everything we did, coordinating everything Coach Devine was, but he wasn't one of those kind of guys who's going to get you fired up like Lou Holtz. Okay, he wasn't a Lou Holtz kind of guy. He just come out and play, and he didn't have a lot of words for you. He just wanted you were prepared. I know one thing: we were prepared when we went out to play. So I kind of leave it there.
And play well, you guys did as well. Your sophomore year, you weren't the feature back, but you did play in 9 games, score 7 touchdowns, en route to a national championship. 43 years later, what are your memories of that season?
Not very. Well, it's funny because my sophomore year, I started the season as a starter, but I got hurt the second game against Ole Miss down there, so I was out for about 4 or 5 games until the Clemson game. We went down. I got a chance to start playing again in the Clemson game. We went down to Clemson and played. Tough. It was every game. When you play for Notre Dame, everybody gets up for you. I mean, that's their game of the season. That's their bowl game, pretty much. They can beat us, and so going into it, and it was just tough. I mean, it was kind of ranked. People knew we were good coming out of my freshman year. We beat Alabama the year before, and so people knew we were good. But Mississippi kind of let us know that we wasn't good as we thought we were. And that was kind of humbling for us. And so from there, it was on. I mean, we had Ross Browner, Willie Fry, those guys, captains. They didn't play. I mean, you start, it was all business after that loss. And so when I finally did get a chance to come back and play, it was good for me. I mean, I was able to help in some of the games. I do think the Southern Cal game was the highlight. I didn't play in that game, but good buddy of mine, Dave Mitchell, just shows you how Notre Dame stays with people. This guy, his name was Dave Mitchell. He scored the first touchdown in the green jerseys against Southern California. I say that because this guy his freshman year had 2 knee injuries, shoulder injuries. I'm just saying, this guy, prior the odds were against him playing. And we became good friends. He's like a brother to me. I had to mention that because that was one of the things about Notre Dame that I love the most. It's the camaraderie, the people you now lifelong friends. Dave became like a brother. He's my best man. I was his best man, his wedding, his best man, my wedding. Those kind of things. So those are the kind of things that people don't see behind the scenes. That was part of that, Notre Dame mystique. People don't see in the back end of it. So I kind of got off subject, but to go back to to that season, my sophomore, the national championship season, it was a tough one. But again, we went game by game. We didn't look for think we were going to win a national championship, but we played each game, to win. I mean, that's what it came down to.
Before we get to a couple of audience questions, After you leave Notre Dame, you were a first-round draft pick, played a couple of years in the NFL for the New England Patriots. But tell us what Vagas Ferguson has been up to over the last 40 years.
Well, just go back to that. The thing about Notre Dame, it prepares you for life. I think the fact that I went to the pros, I was fortunate enough to go. It was an eye opener for me. It was a business. Okay, so people need to know that. But the thing about being a Notre Dame graduate and having my degree is that I didn't have to depend on Notre Dame. I mean, on pro football. It was I could play if I can play it. And I didn't have to. So when I left pro football, it didn't bother me. So that's a good thing. I did end up working for a Fortune 500 company out of Chicago, really here in my hometown. It was called, at the time you had computer systems coming on board. In the 80s, we started getting the personal home computers and stuff. So they needed cable. It's electronic wiring cable. So the company I started with here in Richmond is called Belden Electronic Wiring Cable. And they had sales reps all over the country. So in Chicago they had two, and I was one of the ones in Chicago. So I really ended up living in Chicago after my playing days, and working for this company for about 7 years. And so finally, I wanted to kind of get back into getting around kids. I kind of missed, the football part of it. And so I wanted to I didn't want to coach. I know I didn't want to coach. So I did want to get back around kids in football. So I went, I interviewed at Notre Dame for a couple of positions, not as a graduate assistant or anything in football, just as, just trying to get back to campus because I love the place. So, that didn't work out. It's just so happened my high school here in Richmond, Indiana was looking to do something with kids that weren't involved in sports. We call co-curricular activities. So they invited me in 90, I think in 90, I think it was 89, 90, going into 90. They had brought me down for interviews and to talk about, and I needed to get back home because my family was all here. And I was divorced and had custody of my two kids at the time. And I wanted to get them out of the Chicago area as well and get them back around family. So it kind of worked out that I could get back, help my grandparents who raised me, and also bring my kids back to a hometown where I grew up. So it's a long story, but the bottom line is I got back into education. I got back, they brought me back as co-curricular director. Eventually I would switch over to athletic director and I was there for 3 or 4 years. Then I transitioned into at the time I was going through through the athletic part of it. I got my master's in education and principalship certification. So I transferred it back into the building. Didn't really do the principalship thing as much as just kind of like a dean over students for the first 10 years or so. Transitioned from that. Now, here it is. I'm almost 28 years into the, in the school system, and it'll be my 29th year in February coming up. So it's kind of, worked out for me. I was able to, raise my family, help my grandparents raise my family. And help kids along the way. There's no place I can go in town that people don't know. And it's not because of football that they know me. It's because the things that football taught me and the things that Notre Dame ingrains in you about taking care of others and helping others and those kind of things. So it wasn't about me trying to, because I played football, and everybody know me. It wasn't about the notoriety. I didn't even tell people what I did, where I came from, what I done. It was more about meeting them where they were. And so today I'm still doing that. Today I'm doing truancy, where I actually go out and talk to parents about their kids' education, talk to kids about their education. People say, well, I'll be doing it. No, it's not about that. I could be doing a whole lot of things. I got the education for it. I can do it. But the main thing to me is that I give back to those who gave to me, that taught me, that took, helped me along the way. And so it hasn't been a very, glamorous, but it's been something, a labor of love that I've been able to do, to be here to do the things I do today.
That's great. Now we're just about out of time, but we do have one quick audience question for you. So, you're one of the better running backs in Notre Dame history. Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree this year have really performed well. Quickly, Vagas, what do you see when you watch those two guys?
Oh, just I didn't like to get hit either. Those guys, but some of those guys, I really haven't watched them as much. I have to apologize. I saw a little bit of them last week, but they're good backs, and they're hungry, they're strong. I wouldn't take some of the hits they take. I'll run out of bounds or fall on the ground or something. But those guys are tough. They're young, so they're doing a good job. I will watch them this coming weekend. I've heard a lot about them. Reggie Brooks had told me, that I need to be keeping an eye on them. Again, a little bit I saw them last week was man, they really brought back some memories. Quick, tough, and I love that about them. And they got a good line too. They got an excellent line. So we always go back to the line.
That's the right way. Keep those 5 guys up front.
Yes, and from them we wouldn't be doing anything.
Absolutely. Vagas, thank you so much for joining us and working through the technical issues to make the effort to join us today.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. Have a good time.
Vagas Ferguson, everybody. Now, if you've been to a pep rally or a Notre Dame basketball game here on campus, odds are you've seen the Notre Dame Pom Squad perform. The uniquely student-led group is composed of both Notre Dame and St. Mary's students and has been around since 1976. This week, the Pom Squad joins us from outside Notre Dame Stadium for a performance of the Victory March. Our final guest here today on Football Fridays is entering his 21st season at Notre Dame. He's the all-time winningest coach in Notre Dame men's basketball history with 437 wins. He's led the Irish to 12 NCAA tournaments, 1 Sweet 16, and 2 Elite 8 appearances. The Glenn and Stacey Murphy head men's basketball coach, Mike Brey. Coach, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, Chris, good to be with you, man. It's basketball weather out there. That weather starts turning a little bit, and I start feeling like it's hoop season. But all good. We started practice on Wednesday officially. Today we'll have practice number 3 of the season, and so it's just awesome to be in the gym every day with our guys, even with masks on. It's working.
You're taking away all my questions here, Coach Brey. Now, you just mentioned that you were back in the gym officially for the first time on Wednesday after this long layoff and these crazy last few months. How's it feel just to be back in ropes with the guys?
Well, Chris, I think it's therapy for everyone, mostly the head coach, just to be back with our guys. They left in mid-March. And I thought maybe I'd see him for summer school and we'd go through our summer routine because we thought, oh, we'll be through this and everything will be fine. And then I didn't see him till August 10th when they came back to school. So we've had some preseason workouts and they're in with our strength coach, but the official start of practice where we can go 6 days a week started Wednesday. So to be able to build towards something is awesome. Right now, our opener is December 2nd against Western Michigan here at home. And then the rest of our December slate is extremely competitive. Hopefully we can release it maybe in the next week or two.
You also kind of mentioned wearing masks in practice. Besides just that, what sort of things are you guys having to do differently this year to meet the coronavirus protocols?
I've been really proud of our group. First of all, what are their habits away from here? And I think what's happened with most student athletes on our campus, and there's been some spikes in everybody's team, I think the student athletes, our guys want to play so badly that they don't want to be the one to shut the building down or shut a season down or cancel a game. So I give them a lot of credit on the weekends and the evenings. I think they're their social interactions have been very disciplined and very smart because they want to play. And you know, we do a good job of wearing the masks. Every now and when they'll slip down a little bit, and mine slips off because I'm trying to blow a whistle to stop practice under a mask. But you know what? That's okay, because we're together and we're doing stuff and we're playing the game. And I think, again, the mental health part of being able to be in the gym together as a team, be with your teammates, me being a teacher, being able to teach, that's all been very positive, you know, certainly since Wednesday.
Everyone, if you have a question for Coach Brey, be sure to ask them now, and we'll get to them a little bit later in the interview. And you mentioned December 2nd against Western Michigan, going to be your first game. But this year's schedule is going to be a little weird. A lot of teams are going to play different numbers of games. You're probably going to see some cancellations or postponements, non-conference schedules. Who knows what that's going to look like? So as a coaching staff, how are you and your assistants preparing for this really different year?
Yeah, I think for us, we know December 2 now, you know, you can't have an exhibition or a scrimmage. Those were outlawed. The season was moved back a couple weeks. So we decided to play 25 games. You usually play 31 in a rest. So we've shaved, you know, some off already. And so we figured we would open December 2nd. And here, I'm going to give you our schedule up until Christmas. And I don't have the actual schools, but you can fit it. So December 2nd, Western Michigan at home. December 8th, we will host a Big Ten opponent in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. I don't know who that will be. December 12th, we're at Kentucky. December 15th, we will host an ACC game. Not sure who that'll be yet. December 19th, we will play Purdue down in Indianapolis as part of the Crossroads that we play in. December 22nd, we're on the road for an ACC game. And then we'll go to Christmas. That is our December schedule up until Christmas. And again, you know, we're hoping we can play all 25 of them and stay clean, and we're trying to kind of get organized for when we travel. The one thing that basketball has is, unlike football, our travel party is smaller, our group is smaller. The problem we have, though, unlike football, we play 2 or 3 games a week, you know, not just one. So the routine of testing and 3 tests, and that's where it's going to get interesting for basketball.
That is quite a start to the season for you and the guys, Coach.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about your returning guys in just a second, but first, there's a really unique matchup scheduled with Howard University on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's the first time Notre Dame will visit a historically Black college or university, and there's a great initiative connected with it when we all vote. And tell us a little bit about the impact of that game and the initiative.
Well, I'm very excited about that game, and I know our fans may think I'm crazy. I don't think there's a bigger game on our schedule because of what it encompasses all the way around. Kenny Blakeney, the coach at Howard, I recruited to Duke University many moons ago, and he was my assistant at the University of Delaware. So we go way back, and we decided to do a home and home with them, you know, back in the you know, a year ago when he got the job. But the schedule was December 27th, Howard was going to come to us. And when everything happened with George Floyd and everything that's going on in our country with social injustice and Black Lives Matter, I called Kenny and I said, how about we come to you? And he always wanted us to come on MLK Day. And I said, we're there. Now, that's the midst of the ACC season. But I said, I don't care. We will be there. And we lined it up with the initiative When We All Vote. It's a Michelle Obama initiative that was started by her, and our players have all jumped in. We did a Zoom with the Howard players back in June. They've all registered to vote. They've all are recruiting other people to register to vote. And it sure does sound, from looking at the news, that the polls are busy. The early voting is busy. And this whole voting initiative has been really powerful. So both the Howard players and our guys really got behind When We All Vote back in June and July and August. And so, you know, that will move obviously through November 3rd. And when we play the game, the neat thing about it, the game will be on Fox national broadcast. It'll be a national broadcast. Gus Johnson, who does a lot of Fox Sports, is a Howard grad. So he will call the game. You know, if the Democrats win, I would think Kamala Harris may be sitting on the Howard bench. She's a Howard grad. I don't know if we'll get any calls if that's the case in that game, but I think both teams are going to be able to do some things in the midst of social injustice and certainly play the game. And for a Power 5 school to play on the campus of an HBCU, it just doesn't happen. And I think it's really powerful for our university to go and do that. How about this? Monday is MLK Day. Wednesday is the inauguration that week. So, you know, DC, pandemic or not, is probably going to be buzzing a little bit with everything that could go on. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I think it's been a great educational experience for my guys with this game. Again, we've got 24 other games to play, but there's a lot of special stuff around it that's been used to kind of educate our guys and open their mind. It's spurred on some amazing discussions amongst my team. And I have an interesting makeup. I have 6 black players, 6 white players. Makes for some great discussions in our locker room with the world and what's going on out there. And heck, I've been educated listening to them give feedback. So again, MLK Day, we will be at Howard. They're a pretty good team, and then that'll be in the midst, you know, of an ACC schedule.
Kudos to you and the staff over there and Howard for putting all that together and making that work. A really important thing to do. Now, we're going to open this up to an audience question here in just a minute, but before we do that, we're looking at your team this year. You lose 3 guys, Rex Pfluger, TJ Gibbs, and John Mooney, who played a lot of basketball for you over the last few years. Who are some of the guys that are going to have to step up this season to get you back to the NCAA tournament?
Well, I'm excited about our group in that, you know, 2 years ago when they were young and we threw them to the wolves, we got swallowed whole and got beat up and we took our medicine. And even the first half of last year, we were still searching. We were 2-6 in the ACC coming out of Tallahassee. I said something at a press conference and the ACC fined me, you know, for getting on the refs a little bit and the whole bit. And then we went 9-4 the rest of the way, and we finished 10-10 in the league. And we had beaten Boston College in Greensboro. We were on the bus to the shoot-around to get ready for Virginia when the world stopped. We would have been, most likely, we would have been an NIT team, which would have been good for this group of juniors, especially Hub, Lashevsky, Goodwin, Carmody, Cormac Ryan, who are kind of growing. So now we're older. You know, and we've pretty much through my 21 years, we've been able to stay in an older rotation, and we're kind of back in that again. Jawan Durham is a 5th-year senior. We look for him to give us even more now that Mooney is gone, and we'll need more from him. Nick Jogo is a 5th-year senior coming off the bench. He's played a lot of basketball for us. But it's a 2-year team with the junior class. It's a group that's going to play together for a while. That's why I'm really excited and I want to play, because we've been waiting on this group to be primed to do it and have experience. So Hub, Cormac Ryan, Dane Goodwin, Nate Lashevsky, Jawan Durham, there's your starting lineup. Now is it Jogo off the bench? Matt Zona, a freshman from New York, has been very impressive the first couple days of practice, a frontline guy. Tony Sanders, a freshman from Miami, an athletic wing, also been very impressive as we move forward. We're going to get Robbie Carmody healthy. He's not had the best of luck, but he should be back by Christmas, and no one deserves to be part of it more than Robbie. And so, you know, I'm excited because it's an older group. They've been around, and now they'll play together for 2 years as old guys, not the young guys that got picked on 2 years ago.
That's great. Hopefully not too old, of course, like you and me. But Coach, before we let you go here, let's go ahead and grab one audience question here. You've been called the loosest coach in America. We've known that for about 21 years now, for your laid back demeanor. What did you do to keep loose during the pandemic?
You know, it's funny. I escaped to Florida in April. My son coaches high school football at IMG Academy, and I have 2 grandchildren down there. And I went down there thinking I'd go for a week. and then I extended it a week, and then I extended it a week. And I was down there for a month and got to see my grandchildren almost every other day. And I got into a good workout routine. And I think I'm in the best shape I've ever been in, because you have no excuses not to work out in this pandemic. I haven't been on the road recruiting. I haven't been going over. So I feel we're in good shape. We're not going to we already decided we're not going to wear suits. The NBA coach's look was kind of, and that certainly fits my style after you saw my act in Maui with like gym shorts on. And I may bring the Maui look back for some games, but I think, it's just been so good to be back around our guys. I missed them, and we were doing Zooms, but as we know, it's just not the same. And to see them every day and to be around their personalities and their sense of humor is uplifting.
We will hold you to that Maui invite dress code, Coach. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today, Coach Brey. We appreciate it. Best of luck to you this season. Have a good practice today.
Thanks, guys. Beat Louisville. We'll see you soon.
That is Coach Mike Brey. Now, before we wrap things up on this edition of Football Fridays at the Eck presented by Guinness, I want to invite everybody to join us for our Universal Notre Dame celebration next Tuesday night, October 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be joined by university officials and members of the Notre Dame family to embrace all we love about Our Ladies University. Visit my.nd.edu or the Notre Dame Alumni Association Facebook page for more information. Now, football fans, be sure you stay tuned right here. Coming up in about 15 minutes, another edition of Chalk Talk with Bill and Bill. Former Irish assistant coaches Bill Lewis and Bill Reagan bring more than 60 years of football experience and will help you see the game within the game during tomorrow's matchup with Louisville. Now, before we officially say goodbye, we're going to leave you with a Notre Dame tradition. Trumpets Under the Dome is a must-see on any game day. And while that performance is on a hiatus for this year, we'll close things with this video from 2014. We'll see you back here on November 6th for the next edition of Football Fridays at the Eck presented by Guinness. But for now, I'm Chris Palmquist saying go Irish, beat Cardinals.